Welcome to the City Club of Portland, Oregon's most respected public forum. The City Club was founded in 1915 as a civic research organization. Today, its members are 2,000 men and women who share a common interest in the quality of life and government in the Portland metropolitan community. The City Club meets Fridays at noon in downtown Portland to represent speakers selected for their distinction in specialized fields, their knowledge in specific issues, and their freshness and vitality of their ideas. Today, City Club presents a debate between Earl Blumenauer and Margaret Strachan. They're candidates for City Council. In a few moments, the presiding officer will introduce today's speaker.
Since the swearing-in ceremony for Mayor Ivancy on November 24, 1980, the City of Portland has had a vacancy on its City Council. To fill that vacancy, 18 candidates came forward. On February 17th, this list was reduced to 2, and on March 31st, the City will have identified its newest commissioner. Today, the City Club of Portland welcomes the 2 candidates for that position, Margaret Strachan and Earl Blumenauer. Welcome to the City Club. Today's debate is divided into 4 segments. The first, each candidate will have 6 minutes for opening remarks. In the second segment, each candidate will ask his or her opponent 2 questions in succession. The third segment, each candidate will respond to questions from the audience. These questions have been submitted in writing either at the door or during the debate and are being screened by our club's Standing Committee on State and Local Government. Finally, in the concluding segment, each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing statement. Before proceeding with the opening remarks, I would like to introduce both of the candidates in the order of their presentations. Earl Blumenauer is a native Portlander. He has a political science degree from Lewis and Clark College and a law degree from Northwestern School of Law. From 1970 through 1977, Earl served as assistant to the president of Portland State University. In 1973, he was elected to the first of 3 terms as the Democratic State Representative from Southeast Portland. In 1978, Earl was elected to the Multnomah Board of Commissioners, where he currently serves. As County Commissioner, his responsibilities include liaison to the Department of Justice Services and the Office of County Management. Margaret Strachan is a native of Helena, Montana. She has an English degree from Carroll College in Helena and has worked as a teacher in that state. In 1973, Margaret moved to Portland, where she worked as a campaign coordinator for Charles Jordan and a citizen participation consultant for a private firm. From 1975 through 1979, she served as the neighborhood coordinator for Neighborhoods West, Northwest, a district office of the Office of Neighborhood Associations. Subsequently, she worked as a member of Commissioner Lindbergh's staff until announcing her candidacy for City Council. We begin our debate, 6-minute opening remarks from each candidate. Please welcome our first speaker, Earl Blumenauer.
I welcome the opportunity to share in one of America's great political traditions, the political debate. We're aware of what happened over a century ago with the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates. I don't know what the Strachan-Blumenauer debates will leave in terms of impact on history, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun. It's interesting that more people are going to have the opportunity to hear Margaret and me share our ideas than had the opportunity to witness the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Through the magic of our friends in the electronic journalism, the scope has been expanded. I think that's positive, but it's also had its negative aspects. The Kennedy-Nixon debates in 1970, we were told, were decided not so much by the content of the candidates' speeches, but by the rate of growth of their beard, who wore makeup, who hit their knee getting out of a car door. It gives one pause. But that's a part of the political process. I understand it and I accept it. That's why I'm wearing brown here today. Brown says I'm a nice person. Blue tells you that I want you to like me. It extends down to the neckwear. People on my campaign committee and the volunteer staff said, "Earl, every tie you own looks like the only tie you own." And honest to God, yesterday, I found on my desk 3 ties. I would very much like to have worn one of these ties, but given the current state of affairs, I'm still waiting for an answer from the Ethics Commission on how to handle these unsolicited gifts. So I will proceed directly to deal with my presentation to you this afternoon. It is our city's history that gives me the greatest optimism about our future. Portland has a long tradition of resisting the deterioration of urban living that has affected most cities. Portlanders have decided that our city is not going to be a storehouse for the poor, the old, the young, with a sprinkling of the well-to-do who can insulate themselves from the reality of urban dwelling. Over the last 10 years, when the slide for most cities has been dramatic, Portland has made a commitment which focuses on 5 goals. Our city must be safe. It must offer economic opportunities to all. Our city must be a center for education and culture. We protect the physical beauty of Portland, and that the services and living space available enhance the lives of everyone who lives here. These goals will be hard to achieve with new federal cutbacks in taxes and services. At the same time, local governments are trying to cope with increased service demands and double-digit inflation. To make our city work will require translating our lofty goals and broad ambitions to practical program and decision. I have the record and the ability to make that translation. I'd like to deal with a few specifics. A successful transportation system is critical to our future. I sponsored the bill which created the Oregon Department of Transportation, the bill that gave senior citizens their TriMet discount fare. I've been in the front line fighting for Portland's light rail project since its inception, and I've worked hard to improve our road system. My plans for the future include hard work to defend the current allocation of $850 million that will open up industrial opportunities to the east side to increase future job opportunities. We all agree that housing is critical to our future. My record includes homeowner property tax relief to make housing less expensive. I have worked with citizens to pass the Multnomah County Comprehensive Plan, protecting neighborhoods while ensuring adequate sites for new housing. Historic preservation and senior housing are other legislative accomplishments. My hope for the future is not to establish a new level of government to oversee housing programs, but to make our existing housing programs work, to leverage publicly owned land to reduce housing costs, and to work with neighborhoods to use the new comprehensive plan as a tool to increase housing opportunities. Education is the cornerstone to this city's future. My record is one of leading the fight in the legislature to reform the school funding formula, 7 years of service on the Portland Community College Board, expanding educational opportunities for all Portland citizens, and working to secure funding for programs for the talented and gifted, as well as those children with special problems. My concern for the future is that the City Council provide the kind of leadership and cooperation with our schools to ensure that the city school policy that has been adopted works. The ability to step right into a difficult budget process and to make the budget decisions which represent our community as a whole is part of the record that I bring to the City Council race. A breadth of experience and interest which will allow me to help make the dreams of all of us in Portland a reality. And finally, the experience of making the hard decisions that a commissioner will face immediately as the federal, state, and local budget hammer begins to beat on our hopes for the future. Great promise, great potential, great risk. I look forward to working with each of you as we try to make the legacy of this city stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Earl. Our next speaker, Margaret Strachan.
Thank you, President Schleining and members of the City Club. It's a pleasure and a great thrill for me to be here today. 8 months ago, when I began my campaign full-time, it would have been difficult for me to convince any of you that I would be appearing here today. And there were a number of times during those 8 months would have been difficult to convince me I was going to be appearing here today. I didn't get here alone. I am receiving a tremendous amount of help from many fine people in Portland who care about their government and who share this accomplishment with me. I cannot pass up this opportunity to thank them. It is they who have set the tone for my campaign with their enthusiasm and their energy. And it is they who are knocking on thousands and thousands of doors in every neighborhood of the city. Some campaigns thrive on money. My campaign thrives on people. It is refreshing and reassuring to live in a city where it is still possible for a hard-working, first-time candidate to run ahead of a seasoned political veteran such as Mr. Blumenauer. It says something about our citizens. It says something about hard work and dedication. It says something about the way a democracy can work. Since I have not appeared before the City Club before, please allow me to say just a few words about myself. I am 45 years old and the mother of 7 children and 2 stepchildren, ages 8 to 26. I have 2 grandchildren and am expecting a 3rd one next month. I live with my husband, who is a planning consultant and a professor of urban studies. We live in an inner city neighborhood, and we have great pride in that neighborhood. As a neighborhood coordinator for 6 neighborhoods, I dedicated myself to helping people make city government work for them as individual citizens. As a member of Commissioner Lindbergh's staff, I worked for citizens throughout Portland. These experiences have taught me that people can work together to make this a strong and fit city to live in. I do not intend to relax for a moment my concern for keeping Portland a great city. The other day, after I had challenged Mr. Blumenauer to debate, people asked me why I dared debate an opponent who is said to have exceptional skills in that area, and he does. The reason is very simple. The city council race had been called a lackluster, non-issue race. And I decided that, win or lose, I wanted to make sure that people knew that there are issues in this campaign and that there is a great deal at stake for the citizens of Portland. There are many, many issues that face city government. The city will experience a difficult budget shortfall next year. I am concerned that the city be financially stable and able to meet its commitments to the public. We have to recognize that we have heavy, unmet financial obligations in our pension plans, in maintenance of our roads and capital plant, and in other critical areas. Only prudent management will allow us to meet these obligations and still provide the basic services that citizens expect. The city also has major initiatives ahead that will require continued hard work to carry out. Our comprehensive plan, our 911 program, our downtown projects such as Pioneer Square and Light Rail. These will be among my priorities. We should recognize, however, that we live in a time of shrinking resources. Local government operates on an almost fixed income. We must learn to make the best of it. When I challenged Mr. Blumenauer to debate, I held out 3 issues that I felt were of paramount importance to our citizens. They are the bread and butter issues facing Portlanders and the future of the city. I identified them as safe, secure neighborhoods, affordable housing for all of our citizens, and a strong economic development program for both large and small businesses. While I am prepared to discuss many other issues with Mr. Blumenauer, I don't want to lose sight of the fundamental things that people care about and need. President Franklin Roosevelt noted 40 years ago that there are 4 freedoms that we hold dear in America. If I may, let me paraphrase him in terms of the city of Portland. The 4 freedoms are the freedom to find a job and a decent home, the freedom to conduct business with government's help, not interference. The freedom to walk the streets without fear. The freedom to tell government to get off our backs. These words remain true today. City government must be approachable. We must learn to differentiate between those things that citizens should do for themselves and those things that only government can do. We must learn to listen to our citizens because they know their needs and priorities. City government must help us keep our neighborhoods intact so that people's homes can be secure and their neighborhoods safe. City government must assist our businesses, especially existing businesses, so that they may prosper and provide jobs. If City Hall cannot fulfill these basic needs of our citizens, then we simply haven't done the job. In the words of John F. Kennedy, it is not enough for us to survive. We must prevail. Thank you very much.
In the next segment, each candidate will pose 2 questions to his or her opponent. The rules are 30 seconds to state the question and 2 minutes for the answer. Our first questioner is Earl Blumenauer. Earl?
Thank you very much. In the course of our campaign, we've had a great deal of discussion about housing, and you have alluded to a revenue bond authority that hasn't been used by the city. I'm wondering if you could describe briefly what that issuing authority is and what you would do as a city commissioner to see to it that it is, in fact, utilized.
The Revenue Bond Authority came from the state legislature 2 years ago for underwriting moderate cost housing as well as low cost housing. The original bill proposed that there be no limit for the income level of the housing. I lobbied to put an upper limit on that, and we were successful in our lobbying attempts. Yesterday, I was talking to a bonding person who suggested that it is highly unlikely that the city of Portland can now sell those bonds. It is an opportunity that we have let slip through our fingers because of the timing of the situation. I would still like to look at that and see if it would be possible, but I feel that there is not much hope, given the present economic situation, that we can sell those bonds.
If, as you say, the Planning Commission just doesn't understand housing, why would we not be better off to change the members of the Planning Commission to get people on who do understand housing, rather than proposing the creation of a new governmental structure to try and address housing concerns?
First, I am not suggesting a new governmental structure. I'm suggesting a group of informed lay people that understand housing issues, lenders, builders, the trade union, and educated consumers, with some advice from the Housing Authority of Portland, the Portland Development Commission, and the Bureau of Planning, all of which have housing components in their bureaus or their agencies. This group of folks can then look at housing, put all the pieces of it together, and come up with a strategy that Portland can accomplish. It makes no sense to say that if I am elected to council, I can change the housing situation. I can't wave a magic wand and reduce the interest level, but the city must have a coordinated strategy to begin attacking the problems of housing. We have been unable to do that until this time. And in fact, in the paper this morning, another 16 units or 13 units of low-cost housing was closed without notice, 24 hours notice. I sat on a committee to work on a plan that wouldn't happen again. And one more time, it has happened. The last time this happened, there was a death among one of the people that were removed from the buildings. I want a strategy, and I want it put together clearly so that this doesn't happen in the city of Portland.
The next series of questions will be posed by Margaret.
You and I have agreed that housing is an issue. The day after the election, the City Council faces some decisions about the Housing and Community Development Program. What are your recommendations and priorities for the HCD program?
I think that's a very appropriate question for us to address right now and start enlisting the public dialogue, simply because we are going to be hitting the ground running and the amount of federal funding is going to be dramatically reduced. We're going to be facing a very serious trade-off between economic opportunities and housing in terms of how monies are going to be spent for the infrastructure for inner cities. My personal feeling is that we're going to have to be drawing a very tight list of priorities, and probably that we'll be looking more at, in terms of the use of those funds, for making the decision in terms of job opportunities as opposed to housing. The problem we're facing right now is that Portland's unemployment rate is going up about 0.5% a month, and the monies that we've had available for economic development are going to be dramatically reduced. It would seem to me that our strategy is more probably effectively targeted toward those things that are going to encourage people to be productive, earning members of society if we have to make that choice, rather than de-emphasizing somewhat the use of housing in the use of those resources. I don't see any other alternative.
As you know, I believe strongly in the value of citizen participation. Spent a great number of years of my life working on that. And I find the advice of lay citizens, business people, and professionals is invaluable to elected officials. How would you see the role of citizen advisory committees and budget advisory committees in relationship to city government?
Well, I think the best way for me to answer that is how I have used citizen advisors throughout my public service career. I have, in each of the major areas that I have had responsibility, organized groups of people to help me understand what is going on out in this delivery of the service delivery mechanism. I have, for example, in the area of juvenile justice, while the legislation was pending last session that set up the Juvenile Justice Commission, I met every other week with a group of professionals, of people who are involved within the government structure, concerned citizens, to advise me in what I should do as a public official to try and impact that decision in the legislature. Most recently, in the last round of budget activity at Multnomah County, I sent out literally thousands of postcards to people inviting them to meet with me to discuss the components of the county budget before we decided what the final elements would be. And I established a structure at Multnomah County as the first presiding officer of that reorganized commission that established budget subcommittees that included both elected officials and private citizens in our preliminary deliberations before the budget was finalized. And that same sort of approach is one that I will continue to use if I'm elected to the City Council.
Thank you. In the third segment of the debate today, the candidates will respond to questions posed by the City Club members. These have been screened by our standing committee and will be addressed to the candidates by Christy Muller, seated to my right. The first question will go to Earl Blumenauer.
Earl, the voters have recently rejected the mandatory aspects of the city's weatherization policy. What should the city's role be in energy policy and conservation?
It seems to me that the primary thrust of what we should be doing from this point on is to concentrate on the 95% of that program with which there's basic agreement throughout the community. I'm excited when I visit the center at 28th and Northeast Broadway, when I talk to Pam Dunham about the job that they're doing out there. It seems to me that rather than going back and fighting the very controversial battle over which there is significant disagreement, that we ought to concentrate on those areas of agreement and achieve the most rapid progress available. I would think that the area that we ought to direct most of our attention right now is to provide a few $1,000s necessary for the administrative structure to permit the use of $1 million that we have waiting for use for commercial energy audits. The money will not be used until there is an administrative structure that is available. I think that's an important third leg of that energy policy, and I would suggest that that's where we begin. But in terms of refighting the battle on mandatory weatherization, I don't think it's timely. I'd rather concentrate in the areas where we agree and achieve progress in that manner.
Additionally, it seems to me that the city, the state, and the federal government has given a number of incentives for homeowners to weatherize their homes. But there has been little or no incentives for apartment owners. Again, this frequently causes the lower income levels of our society to pay higher energy costs. We don't get warm buildings. We waste energy. I would like to see us work on some incentives for apartment owners as well as for single homeowners.
Margaret. Mayor Ivancy recently reorganized the planning process in Portland city government. Will this improve the planning process?
Yes. I'm not sure whether it will or not. I'll be very frank. I think that it's a little unfair to suddenly say yes it will or no it won't until we see how the new process works. I've talked a number of times throughout my campaign about streamlining the permit processes, the conditional uses, and the variances, not to remove the safeguards that they provide, but to make them simpler for people to understand and get through. And if it leads to those kinds of solutions, I feel that it's a good idea.
If I had been making those decisions, I'm not certain that I would have chosen that form of organization for conducting the affairs of planning. But what is at issue here is the fact that we have a new mayor who is entitled to structure city government as he sees fit, as his predecessors have done, to conform to his goals, his operational style, and to where the city council is at this juncture. It is premature to make a judgment as to the efficacy of what the mayor has done in terms of restructuring it to meet his goals and objectives. I hope that it works for him, and that is, of course, his right. My intention as a member of the City Council is to be supportive of these efforts, but when there is something that I encounter that I think perhaps needs some change, then I take that to the mayor. But in terms of second-guessing him before he's had a chance to work it out, I think it's premature.
Earl, the school board currently is faced with many major issues: school closures, desegregation, and community use of school buildings. Considering the impact of each of these issues, what should be the role of the City Council?
You sure I only have 2 minutes? One of the reasons why I've been attempting to structure an actual debate between the two candidates to deal with educational issues is because I think that's the cornerstone of where we're going. In a shorthand manner, let me speak to what I think ought to be done. The 14 or 15 points in the city school policy that was adopted in June of 1979 needs to be placed on the desk of every member of the City Council. They need to review it, and they need to identify those routine decisions that come across their desk to discern the educational impact. The City Council specifically, I think, should direct that the Planning Bureau plays a greater role in the school closure issue. I've heard from a number of people on the inside of city government who feel that there's a lot of information that could be made available to parents, board members, administrators, anybody in the community who has an interest in how the school closure issue is going to be made, and would make for more informed and enlightened decisions. I think that it's still not too late to effect that change, and I would urge that it occur. Second, there are a number of areas where we can cooperate with education to promote more efficient use of resources. And I'm thinking specifically of things like purchasing, personnel, where there is duplication between the two units of government, and where I think we can save taxpayer money by working together to try and stretch those resources. Finally, there's the question of what goes into those schools that will ultimately and inevitably be closed. Citizens have a right to expect maximum effort on the part of each member of the City Council to assure that those vacant schools are not a blight on the neighborhood, but they are used for constructive and positive purposes. And that is my commitment if I'm elected.
In addition to that, I would like to see, especially that we begin working on those school closure issues. It's much easier to work out policies, guidelines, criteria for what goes into those schools in a situation that is not highly charged emotionally. If we talk about closed schools in the city, it's a much different subject than if we talk about your school in Irvington, my school in Chapman, somebody else's school in Mount Tabor. The decisions then become very confused with the emotional feelings of the people involved, and you come up with decisions that are not as wise, not as well used, and don't make as much sense for the community. I would like to see us begin working on the city school policy, the school closure issue, and how the city and the schools relate to each other as soon as possible. We've wasted too much time already.
This question goes to Margaret. The city's audit report for fiscal year 1980 discloses that the unfunded liability of the Portland Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund was $452 million. What alternatives do you recommend for handling this obligation?
Maybe we could pass the hat? If you look carefully at that report, the $452 million does not come due tomorrow. It's extended over a considerable period of time. We have 30 years to basically work this whole situation out. We must begin today. We must begin working on what happens today. I talked to people from both the police and the fire bureau, and they're already working on some suggestions. The city and the city council, as well as the Bureau of Budget Management, must begin working on solutions to that problem. Until I saw what some of those suggestions are, I'm not going to run off in another direction saying, let's do X, Y, and Z. I think it is important to keep in mind that that $452 million is not a bill on the desk to be dealt with right this second, but we must be prepared to deal with it when they do come due.
We disagree. The audit report points out that you don't own your city. It's owned, that it is, there's a first mortgage on the assets of the city by the pension fund. You start on it today, and you treat it as though that bill were coming due tomorrow, because in fact it is. Each day that you delay, that you have some other committee study it and analyze it, compounds the problem in the future. There are three things that the new commissioner should do as of the first day that he or she walks on the council. First is to push to make sure that at least some money is set aside to start funding that tremendous unfunded pension liability. No matter how small the amount is, no matter how painful it's going to be to carve out of a very tight budget, that must be done. The second is that we have to look hard right now at changing the standards for new people who are hired into the system. If you wait for another year or 2 years to study it, then each person who comes in establishes a contract right to the same terms. And it again compounds the problem that we face. You can't afford to wait. Finally, you have to look at the very painful and sensitive area of what constitutes disability. This is an area that, again, that's going to upset some people, but it is key if you're going to be able to make the sorts of changes necessary to avoid having a wildly disproportionate amount of the future city budget tied up in meeting this unfunded liability because some politicians have decided to study it some more. We don't need to study it. We need to start acting, and we need to start acting next month.
Short answer question, Earl. Does Portland need a major convention center? Where should it be located, and how should it be financed?
Yes. The east side on the light rail near the Lloyd Center and the Coliseum. And I would propose that we go ahead and continue to look at tax increment financing and cooperation closely with the private sector in some sort of joint development opportunity.
On that one, we agree.
Short enough for you?
There was just fine. If a decrease in federal funds mandates curtailment of city services, how should areas for cutbacks be determined, and which services do you propose for cutbacks, Margaret?
The City of Portland is in good shape in terms of its basic services. We have never used federal dollars to provide police, fire, sewer, water. The cutbacks will come in other areas, and they will be painful because we take for granted those basic services. They've been good to us. When I worked in Commissioner Lindbergh's office and dealt with complaints day in and day out, there were really very few complaints about the basic services in the City of Portland. So the cutbacks will come in other areas: housing and community development, economic development. Those are the areas that we will have to begin making tough choices. Do we fund rehab for apartments, or do we fund economic development, or do we fund some of the other kinds of programs that we've had, crime prevention, grassroots crime prevention programs that we've had? But the basic services of the City of Portland are not in danger at this point.
My impression is that basic services are in fact going to be threatened as a result of this. We have in fact used federal funds to extend basic services. I would imagine that a careful audit of the expenditures of the last 10 years will show that probably 75% of the sewer funding, for example, has come from the federal government. The law, in two senses, I suppose. Our law enforcement resources have been dramatically extended in the City of Portland using, for example, LEA grants. And to assume that basic services are going to continue with these dramatic reductions in federal resources is wrong. It will not, in fact, occur. That means that they will, in fact, occur. There are three areas that I would be involved as a member of the City Council. First is I would prioritize, as I mentioned earlier, those expenditures that will maximize the creation of jobs. Using some of the infrastructure, for example, the SLU Bridge, access to Swan Island, areas of freeway access from the I-5 southbound to open up job opportunities in the east side industrial area. I think we target that in those areas that are going to have the most economic impact. The second area that I would look deals with some actual budget reductions, and that deals with the administrative structure of the city. I've been doing that for the last 9 years. I know how to go about it, what to look for, and I'm willing to make the difficult decisions to collapse the structure, to pull things together, to try and achieve some savings there. And finally, throughout this campaign, I have talked about areas of duplication and overlap where money is being wasted by a variety of different governmental units. And I'll be looking for ways to pull together those functions to try and further stretch scarce resources.
This question goes to Earl. Southeast Asian students now approach 10% of the population in Portland public schools. By 1990, Southeast Asian students will comprise 20% of public school students. What should be the city's role in regard to the increasing demands of this minority community?
First of all, we have to accept the reality of their presence in our community. And I'm afraid that a number of people simply have been ignoring this situation. It is one that it has become painfully clear to me through a number of personal and political experiences where I have seen the problems that are being promoted. We have to deal with it in a forthright manner. We have to, I think, have some sense of what brought these people to our community. And I think there needs to be a strong sense of tolerance that can be articulated in the way that public officials deal with their responsibilities to these people who are, after all, residents in our community. There few areas where I'm prepared to go to the mat with the federal government. I think on balance, the notion that everybody suffers a little bit as we try and retrench and reallocate and get our economy under control, I think makes sense. And you haven't heard me, in my role as either a candidate or an elected official, railing about the proposed cutbacks. I'm prepared to deal with them and the opportunities that they supply. But one of the areas that is critical is the federal government's reversal of signals and bringing people into our community and pulling back the resources necessary, both to local government and to our schools. And I'm prepared to go to Washington, D.C., to lobby with our very effective congressional delegation and to go to the court of public opinion to make sure that those resources continue, because it shouldn't be the property taxpayers in Portland who bear this burden. It should fairly be shared by the entire country, the federal government which helped create the situation. Our responsibility is one of decent, sane, sensitive administration and making sure we don't let the feds off the hook.
First the state does it to us, and then the federal government does it to us. You've got to do this, and we ain't going to pay you to do it. I agree with Earl that we mustn't let them off the hook. But additionally, I'd like to use this opportunity to comment on the fact that any time in our history when there's been shrinking resources and high unemployment, intolerance seems to go along with that. I think it's incredibly important that while we're tightening our belts, we're not stepping on somebody else's throat. I would like to urge everyone in this room, everyone that listens to me, that we must work out how we deal with all the refugees and all the minorities in our community in a fair and good fashion. Additionally, I'd like to point out that there are a number of private social service agencies in this city that are working on this problem. I have a real fear that the city doesn't even realize they exist. Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, SOAR, Metropolitan Family Services, a number of other agencies have been attempting to mainstream these people into our community. Those agencies and what they are doing needs to be coordinated and supported by the city. Thank you.
Margaret, what should the City Council role in urban renewal projects be, specifically the Morrison Street come Cadillac Fairview development?
We're partway through that process now. We have a plan, we have some guidelines, we have some suggestions about what it should be and how it should look. First of all, the old Cadillac Fairview project was a problem because the process was a closed process. Someone came from somewhere else to tell us what was best for us, how we ought to deal with it, what fun it was going to be for us to live underneath the bridges of Cadillac Fairview. Portland needs to be in the driver's seat. I think we've taken that position now. I would like to see us continue to follow the path we've laid out, look at a number of proposals, use all the tools at our disposal to get the best project on that site. We need a project on that site downtown. That project, Pioneer Square, the performing arts centers, finish downtown in some ways. That is, finish what we've started in the last 10 years. It's important that we have that project, but I think that it's important that we all have a say in it. When all those projects are together, downtown will be a lovely place, and we can then decide where we're going to go from there. I see that as the last chapter of Book 1 and the first chapter of Book 2.
The future of the downtown is of vital interest to every single one of you in this room, everyone who's listening at home, even if you don't live in the city of Portland. The core area is going to determine the nature and vitality of economic development of this entire region. It seems to me that the key element in the future downtown development of the city of Portland is the Morrison Street project. I think that we are making several changes that are going to improve the process so that we're not going to run into the roadblocks that we had with Cadillac Fairview. First of all, it is important to make sure that people understand what the ground rules are. And I think PDC is to be commended for the work that they're undertaking now. For example, to target what we want in that project. A high-quality mainline department store, something that will attract people from throughout the region into downtown, a unique benefit that is not to be found in some of the suburban shopping centers. Second is to target how we're going to deal with the people that are going to be affected. At Dave's, they may be moved for the second time. They don't own their own fixtures. What's the policy of PDC for people in those unique circumstances? Sky bridges. Part of the problem with sky bridges is we've never thought about them. We hadn't laid out our procedures. We're going to have a sky bridge policy now that people can comment on, separate from the emotion regarding a particular development. Finally, and perhaps most important, is that we have reversed the process so that we are laying out on the table from the outset what benefits are going to be available to any developer who wants to bid. That means that everybody knows from the outset they can compete. We can make sure that the city of Portland gets the best possible deal.
Fine. What is your opinion of city council consolidation, and is it inevitable? Earl.
Well, I have different feelings about city council consolidation than I have about city-county consolidation.
I meant city-county.
No. Okay. Well, I say...
I thought maybe we were going to job share.
Yes.
That's very good.
I'm quick.
She took my line. And she says she's never done this before. What were those 19 previous meetings, Margaret? Sumner's starting to talk. In 1974, I was a very enthusiastic supporter of city-county consolidation. I went door to door in southeast Portland, dodging Dobermans. I spoke at a number of neighborhood coffees, extolling the virtues of one large unit of government that would cover half the metropolitan area. If it were on the ballot today, I would still probably support it, but with far less enthusiasm. I think we have a potential structure that's going to do a much better job for the citizens of this region. We have the first popularly elected regional government in the United States, Metro. And Metro has the capability of allowing citizens to have direct input into those issues that are truly regional in nature. And if they don't like it, they can throw the people out of office or recall them. They couldn't do that with Cragg. You can also, I think we're going to also see the establishment of 2 or 3 other full-service cities, which I would like to see wall-to-wall within the urban growth boundary. Not seeing Portland become a super city, but just the lead agency in the region. And I think that's going to give the citizens less government, but more effective government. And I think in the long run, it's a much better approach than city-county consolidation.
In concept, I agree with that, but I have some problems with the effectiveness of Metro. They have been unable to site a recycling center. They have been unable to get the Johnson Creek problem dealt with. Before I'm willing to move into the area of saying, let's not look at city-county consolidation, let's look to Metro for this leadership, I would like to see that leadership exhibited.
This will be our last question. To Margaret. Which bureau assignments are you most interested in and why? Quickly.
For short answers for both of these, please.
Do you want me to answer this as to what I'd like or as to what I think I'd get?
What you'd like.
All right. What I'd like to have is the Bureau of Planning and the Bureau of Budget. I'd also take the Office of Neighborhood Associations and Emergency Services. If I had those, I'd sleep well at night and be delighted. Oh, and why? Because planning and budget are the real Really and truly, they're the power organizations in the city. Neighborhood associations because they're close to my heart, and the real power of this city are the people, and that is the group that deals on a regular basis with the citizens of Portland. Emergency services because it seems to me really sensible to put neighborhood associations where you have the volunteer groups right there in contact with emergency services, because in times of emergency, you need that volunteer network that the neighborhood associations provide.
I will, if I'm elected to the City Council, will get, and I would welcome the assignment of the Bureau of Human Resources. I think that that's going to have a great deal to do about the manner in which we deal with some of the most sensitive and I think threatened areas of city involvement. I feel that as long as you're on the City Council long enough, you serve for one term, you run for re-election, you're going to get all those assignments anyway. And while I agree with Margaret that the Bureau of Planning and the Budget Office are critical to the future of the city and the way the city runs, the fact is that each of us have an equal say in how the budget is prepared and in each and every zoning decision. So I'm willing to exercise that as one of the 3 members necessary to secure an affirmative vote on that matter, and look forward to serving as the Commissioner in charge of Bureau of Human Resources.
Thank you very much. We now begin the 4th and final segment of the debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. And our first speaker, Earl Blumenauer.
You've heard the issues and goals that bring us together for the debate today. I was amused somewhat by the newspaper's perspective that we have a hard time disagreeing on anything. It's true we share the same goals, but that's true for most of us here in this room. One of the most important resources the City of Portland brings to its future is a shared sense of direction and fundamental values that lead us to many of the same conclusions about issues. There is a world of difference, however, in the performance you can expect. I have made a career in dealing in specifics, of taking goals and turning them into hard decisions and program realities. I am used to the pressure of public life. Yesterday, my perspective and research on the best interests of the citizens of Multnomah County forced me to vote against a friend and a campaign contributor. It was hard, but it was necessary. The person who fills this City Council vacancy will be immediately faced with hard decisions on a wide spectrum of issues. They are the issues that I have faced as a professional: land use planning, budgeting, collective bargaining, emergency medical services, education, light rail, the pension system funding, water quality. My opponent and I have major differences, for example, in the one specific area that has been advanced in her campaign, dealing with the solution to the housing problem. We agree that there's a problem. We disagree in the way to approach it. She proposes forming a housing commission. I know from my experience in government that that's no solution. What you do is you get people on those agencies right now charged with the administration, and you make them work. The City of Portland during the next 20 months will set the direction for our next 20 years. The challenge is one not of defining our goals, but of making programs work, of facing the tough decisions, of representing a broad spectrum of interests, and aggressively taking your dreams about the city and turning them into reality. Thank you very much.
And now for her closing remarks, Margaret Strachan.
We have a crisis of confidence in government. We have a crisis because government so often fails to listen. My campaign has been based on the belief that government can work and that we in Portland can make it work for us. The success of my campaign is proof to me that citizens themselves can make a difference and that they can elect someone who will listen to them. We need a sympathetic, understanding, and effective ear on City Council. We need someone that people believe in. We need someone who has earned that trust. For the past 7 years, I have worked on city issues, city budgets, policy decisions, bureau problems, land use issues, citizen problems. I have learned City Hall from the inside and from the outside. I have the background needed to move immediately into the city council seat and effectively represent the citizens of this community. Mr. Blumenauer has often spoken of his legislative record. Until recently, I've had trouble responding to that. I had never thought of things I'd worked on as my record. They were things we had done, accomplishments we had made. They were the record of our community. They were conflicts we resolved, better industrial areas we planned, business expansions we had pushed for, new bus routes we had worked on, new housing we had developed. They were successes for the community and from the community. They were things we all were proud of. I want to see that same pride, that same sense of sharing spread throughout Portland. I promise you that 6 months from now, I will be able to come to you and talk with you of our record, of our accomplishments, and of our city and the pride in it that we all share. Thank you very much.
Our thanks to both Earl Blumenauer and Margaret Strachan for a most impressive kind of debate. Thank you for attending. Thank you for coming before the City Club. I also would like to thank those members that submitted questions. Thank you for your assistance. Let me remind you that the election day is March 31st, and our meeting next week to discuss an economic Dunkirk, Senator Mark Hatfield. The meeting is adjourned.
City Club meetings are videotaped on Fridays at Liberty Cable and can be seen following on Monday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. over this cable channel. This program is intended for the private use of our audience and may not be used otherwise without the expressed and written permission of the City Club of Portland. Next week's speaker will be Senator Mark Hatfield, speaking on the economic Dunkirk.